Hey everyone, so welcome to our special crossover edition of the HawksZone Rundown. Tonight we're going to have Brandon and Adam from the Seahawks podcast join us to kind of chop up the season to this point, what happened on Thursday night, and kind of get their views on what the direction of this team is and if there's a way to fix the direction of the team currently. So I'm going to bring both those gentlemen in and we'll get this going.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game.
For this run. What a run. Marshawn Lynch. Get off me.
DK.
Yes, sir.
Hey, it's John Schneider with the Seattle Seahawks.
And Washington's got away. Leon Wilson to catch. Geno Smith and Jimbo. The Seahawks are going to host the NFC Championship.
Every year, the NFL does. Is it going to be another 9 and 8?
Mike MacDonald got to finish something.
They have to fix the offensive
Part of his
line.
success and part of
Ambition of being the LOB
Want to hear? That's trading DK Metcalf.
Play him aggressive.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with Ryan and Bryce.
Brandon, Adam, welcome to the HawksZone Rundown.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, man, totally appreciate it. That intro's killer, dude. I love
That
it.
is a Ryan who unfortunately can't join tonight's brainchild. So he kind of came up with it. So yeah, it's kind of our signature thing that we've got going. So, but guys, so let's get into this. So, what'd you think of Thursday night? Not gonna cut around the bush. Go right into it. What'd you think?
Yeah. Well, it hurt my feelings. I'll tell you that. Like, that was one of those games that you watch and you have high hopes because all off season you're thinking, oh, Mike MacDonald, he's the defensive guru and he put the smack down on Kyle when he was with the Ravens. And finally we're going to be tough on D and going to, take down this Niners team that honestly, I think we're all tired of seeing celebrating victories against the Seahawks. And we got none of that, especially in the first half. It was dreadful from the gate, and it was all three phases. Brandon, you didn't get to watch it live, so you watched it after the fact. I don't know if you came away with a different feeling.
It was a weird feeling because especially after I followed the score, so I knew what was going on just in terms of the score. And I almost see every game live. It didn't work out for this one time. And then I joined you guys for the post-game show. And so I got to see everybody's reaction and like how everybody was feeling after the game. And so I had all of those feelings of following the score, seeing what was happening, and everybody's reaction, like all that was in there. Then when I went to go watch the game, and I guess it didn't match up to kind of how I thought it was ultimately going to look. And so I'm kind of in this weird spot of, well, we lost to the Niners. It's annoying because I obviously wanted to win, and they're in this position, which is perfect for, if we go out and beat them, then they're just in shambles because thinking, their coach is the worst. And I really wanted a lot of that. But when you turn the ball over 3 times during a game and they score 12 points off of your turnovers and you lose by 12 points, and you have a couple other times where you kind of got away with a couple, like not turning over the football when it probably should have gone the other way. And it's like, oh, yeah, I guess that's fine. Let's move forward and see where it goes from here.
Yeah, no, it was hard to watch last night because it gave me so many last 5 iterations of this matchups kind of feels to it. Like there were moments where it felt a little different, but overall, I honestly was kind of like, this is supposed to feel different. The reason we kind of moved on in certain aspects was to try and change the way this had felt. But I honestly, like watching that game, I kind of came back to a realization like this team isn't where I think some people thought it was going to be after the changes and, how the first 3 games had gone to this season. I really think this kind of put a damper on where they are 6 games in the season, has made a lot of people kind of question the direction that they're going. And is it a playoff caliber team or are we closer to the rebuild? Like, you look at a gas gauge and it's either you're going towards empty or you're going towards full. Where are we going with this team? at this point, I'm feeling more confident saying that I think they're closer to more of a rebuild than they are a playoff team at this point. Or reset. I should say reset, not rebuild. Reset.
You can use rebuild. It's fine. It's, out of the R words, it's not a terrible one.
Yeah, I'd be more okay with that because, and I don't know what your guys' take on this, on how quickly a team should be successful after a coaching change, but it took Pete about 3 years to get the LOB going together. He started in 2010 after that awful Jim Mora experiment. And it took 2010, 2011, 2012, we started to see that team finally develop into who they were going to be. I honestly think this is going to take 3 years because there's a lot of John Schneider, Pete Carroll DNA in this roster still. I don't think it's necessarily a scheme issue because I look at some of the guys that have gone around off of Mike MacDonald's staff, like Tennessee's defensive coordinator. Tennessee's defense is one of the top defenses in the NFL this year statistically. I don't think it's just scheme's been figured out. I think it's a lack of roster flexibility to play his scheme and style properly. And you're seeing that because of how this team was constructed last year and I'd say 4 years prior to that.
It's an interesting thought.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. In terms of how long a coach takes to turn a team around, I found it hilarious through the entire offseason that everybody was like, fire Pete, get the next guy. We're going to win a Super Bowl. Like it was just microwave a chip on our show. We were talking about it over and over again. Look, getting to 9-10 wins every single year for over a decade isn't easy. And it's something that takes time to build. And you flip over to a new coach and you don't know for sure how that's going to go. And everybody just assumed that it'd be an upgrade. And then you get a very young coach on his first head coaching gig as the guy that you replace him with. And then you bring in a young D coordinator that's never done the job. And then you bring in a guy who doesn't have a lick of NFL experience to run the other entire half of the football. And we're surprised there's growing pains. Like I'm not. In terms of, does the personnel fit the scheme? Yes and no. I mean, the idea that the defensive line, I think, is better this year in terms of the personnel there. And Leo Williams can play in any scheme. Like, Jaron Reed can play in any scheme. Like, I don't think that's a problem. I think really where it's at is linebacker. They brought in 2 stopgap guys to play linebacker this year as you're trying to retool this roster, and they're not working. Like, Jerome Baker is not working. He guesses wrong all the time. He did nothing. He did nothing on the big run at the end of the game. Like Hankins, they try to pin it on him in the broadcast, but Hankins is piling his dude back into that gap to squeeze it down. And then you see our defensive lineman right next to Hankins. And then you see Baker standing dead behind that defensive lineman doing nothing, just standing there. And then points around after it too. Like he's surprised. Like, no, that's your gap, man. That was you.
Yeah, no, Baker for me has been I would much rather see Tyrese Knight out there getting those reps that Baker's getting. Let him develop, let him go forward. The other guy for me on the others, like on the defensive side, that to me falls in the same category as Baker is Rayshon Jenkins. Like, I would much rather see Kobe Bryant or Kayvon Wallace starting next to Julian Love. Kayvon Wallace, the only reason I'm saying Kayvon Wallace before everyone shakes their head and hates me for it is...
Oh, no, I'm fine with that one. It was
Kayvon was the one.
Laker.
Kayvon took a terrible angle on that last big run.
That is true. He did take a terrible angle.
So did Julian Love on the big touchdown. Are you mad at him?
A little bit.
Okay.
But I would
Kayvon's
much rather
a little
see
more
them
inconsistent about it.
Jenkins, to me, his biggest contribution so far has been picking up the fumble in the Giants game and running at 90 yards. He's had horrible fits in multiple games. He's been beat multiple times. But the one play for me outside of the long run with Baker, Adam, that you're talking about, was after the first Geno interception, we get the Niners into a 3rd and 8 in their own end, and Brock Purdy beats Jerome Baker to the first down marker. And that to me is like, you cannot get beat by Brock Purdy. And I get he's a bit of an athlete, but you had an angle to him and you took the wrong angle and let the guy get a first down. Like, that's your job as a linebacker. Like, you should be licking your chops at, hey, the quarterback's running and he's not Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson or any of those guys. Like, I should be able to just pounce on this guy, and he doesn't. And so I'd rather see Baker out, Knight in with Dodson, and see what that looks like going forward. Because I think Dodson, yes, he had a rough game, but I think he's a better linebacker than Baker and someone that you could potentially re-up for another year contract if you don't find anybody in the draft that you like. The thing on the D-line, I agree. Like, Leo can play anywhere in it. Jaron Reed, as he gets older, I think he's starting to show a little bit less versatility than what he had maybe prior in his younger years. But the thing for me is, like, once you lose Murphy and Williams, the depth on this D-line I don't think, at least, it doesn't fit exactly what Mike MacDonald needs on it. And that's where you see it. You see the starting group fits perfectly and they work. Murphy, Williams, Jaron Reed rotating in, even Mike Morris a little bit. But once you start seeing Hankins having to play more than his fair share of snaps, you're starting to see that versatility in Mike's scheme, I think, fall apart a little bit because of that limitation to the roster, is what I would kind of say.
Yeah, and you'd think Draymond Jones would be able to provide a little bit more of a spark, especially when I think they gave him that contract expecting him to kind of grow into that, just because you'd seen promise, I think, from him in Denver. And yeah, we just haven't seen it. And unfortunately, yeah. And Baker's probably the most disappointing of the acquisitions so far. I mean, go back to, gosh, there was one throw to Kittle where, Kittle runs into Baker's zone and Baker doesn't even go with him. And he has like 10 yards of space between him and Kittle. It's like, dude, that's going to be your guy. Why don't you go cover your guy?
Yeah, it feels like Baker is off doing his own thing. If you're going to wear the cowboy collar, I guess maybe it makes you do cowboy shit, because that's all he's doing. Like, he's just running around like a freelancer. And it's just true. It's infuriating to watch it. But in terms of safety, definitely don't want to see Kobe out there. No, thank you. Never, ever. I'm good on that. But in terms of Kayvon, I mean, is he really that much worse than Jenkins? Jenkins been okay. But okay. Really, if you want to get granular about like what's wrong with this team, talking about the defensive line, and to your point, Bryce, the depth isn't there after your starters. And offensively, Schneider seems to have a refusal to make an investment in the interior of the offensive line. And here we are reaping the dividends of those poor decisions in drafts past.
Yeah, I said it on our post-game show yesterday. The thing I think that drives me the most nuts about John Schneider right now is if this season goes really off the rails, and I'm talking like we maybe cap out at 6 wins or 5 wins, it's an extreme indictment on his roster construction for the prior years outside of this draft. But for me, the thing is, his statement does not look good now about, well, guards are overpaid and overdrafted. And in our own division for the last decade plus, we've had some of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL wreak havoc on a mobile quarterback in Russell Wilson when he was here. You had Aaron Donald, you had Armstead, Justin Smith with the 49ers, DeForest Buckner. Like, we've had guys just wreak havoc in our interior, and we've never really had solid guard play. You've kind of gone through the bargain bin with Mike Upati, DJ Fluker. Damian Lewis was serviceable. Like, I'd say he's a massive upgrade over Lincoln Tomlinson at this point in the season. And like, you invest in guys. Why isn't Christian Haynes out there? Like, it can't be that worse with Christian Haynes, honestly, than Bradford or Tomlinson at this point. Like, they constantly are one of the lowest graded out lineman tandems at guard in the NFL. You got to try something new. And I wonder with this mini bye they've got before Atlanta, if there's seriously some sort of change that comes there.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to see, because Haynes, maybe, what did he get? 8 snaps this past game. So it seems to be going down for him. It's real weird what they're doing with Bradford and Haynes in terms of trying to make a decision between those guys. And Tomlinson hasn't showed to be a whole lot better either. And in terms of overdrafting guys, I mean, all you have to do is look across at the Niners and their guards they drafted in the 2nd and 3rd round. Like, those are attainable guards to have. Yeah, they're not the greatest, but I think you have to do a little bit of investment. I mean, I still am frustrated about allowing Damian Lewis to walk. Yeah, it would have been expensive, but I think Damian, based on what he's done in Carolina, has shown that he could be good. And so often you develop these young guys and then they go, like, linemen need those 4 years to develop, and then they hit that veteran area, and it's like, okay, now it maybe paying guards isn't that bad of a thing, I don't think.
Yeah, no, Brandon, I don't think it really is. And honestly, like, I just start to wonder, like, I look at when Drew Brees went down to New Orleans. They invested in tackles when he was initially there, but their biggest assets were in the guard position. If you have a pocket passing quarterback and Geno's mobile, but he's not run around like Russell Wilson or Lamar Jackson, escape crazy trouble and go for a 60-yard run. Like he did his big run earlier this year. Give him credit. It was surprising. But when he's constantly having his guards in his lap because they can't pass protect to save their lives, your offensive downfield attacks isn't going to work. And that's, I think when I look at Grubb coming over from Washington, because I watch the Huskies, I'm a big Huskies fan, I could see his affinity of, hey, look, I've got JSN, I've got Tyler Lockett, I've got DK Metcalf, and I've got, it's like almost switch with the offensive receivers. I've got K9, who's an upgrade on Dylan Johnson in my running game. I wonder if there was like a blackout on his contract that said, do not look at the offensive line, and Scott Huff, do not look at the offensive line. It just, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Because their system doesn't fit the offensive line that you have. Like it just doesn't. Yes, we're moving the ball, but it's like boom or bust. Basically, we hit one big deep play and then we stall out for 3 drives and we're not really moving the ball. Like something's got to give here, and they can't run the ball. Like K9s can only pinball so much behind the line of scrimmage before he breaks. And at this rate, like we're hooped in that regard because we're averaging, I think it was the last game was like 2.6 yards a carry or something.
Mm-hmm. Game before that was like 7 yards a carry, and the game before that was like 5 or 6 or something along those lines. You bring up Grubb, and man, when he was hired, I was furious. Like it made no sense to me. College dudes do not pan out in the NFL when they don't have any NFL experience. The history is littered with them. I hated his style of offense. All shotgun, all spread them out, all throw it down the field and go from there. That's great in college. It's fantastic in college. But in the league, you can't get away with that, especially when you have an offensive line that has deficiencies in pass blocking. So not only do you have, Stone Forsythe out at right tackle and Bradford, who's not really known as a pass blocker, Connor Williams working himself back into shape from the ACL, and then a career journeyman in Tomlinson, who's never been known for pass blocking either. You've got personnel that's not suited for sitting in the gun all the freaking time and throwing bombs down the field instead of running the football and doing some of the other things. You make all those offensive linemen play backwards when you play that style of football. Grubb's got to figure it out quick, fast, and in a hurry. Get your ass under center, start running the football, and go to the play action game, and let your offensive linemen who are built more to play downhill like Tomlinson and Bradford to do that instead of asking them to do what is their weakness. It makes no sense to me. I saw the effort from Grubb this last game to maybe get to it, but the idea that they can't run the ball, I don't buy it. It's just that they haven't practiced it all off season, and it's not in their DNA. And the problem with it all is if you're soft on offense, it bleeds over to defense. So we can't stop the run on defense, and we're soft offensively. You're going to get jellied every game. That's just how it is.
And you brought up the roster construction part of it. And so that's where I have a little bit of leeway for Schneider with this particular group, because if they're going to look for this certain style of offense, and now you're dealing with primarily guys who have been there from a previous regime, like that may take some time then to work out if you're trying to find guys for the system on the offensive line. So I'm willing to, that's where I think it might take some extra time. Roster construction on the defense side, though, I know that part of it, I feel like MacDonald has been so good at making guys fit within, taking guys that have struggled elsewhere and then fitting them in and having them improve then within his defensive system. And so that part of it, I guess I'm less flexible with, less willing to put that onto John Schneider. But I think that, if we saw the defense shift then with the addition of Roquan Smith on that Ravens defense. Like I can't help but wonder if we were to get like a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker who's kind of in the middle of his career, would that then flip some of these issues that we're seeing on defense? Maybe
it might. It's actually funny. So someone's commented in here, Adam, and kind of to your point about how the offensive line needs to go downhill, but the other position, like our offense seems to be split from what the O-line could be good at to what Grubb wants to run. And this is kind of what Grubb has said about Haynes, apparently, which is Grubb has said Haynes doesn't have the power needed like Bradford. Yet they don't want to run the ball in a gap power scheme all the time, which would suit Bradford and Tomlinson. They like their zone and they like those type of things, which for big guards is not an easy thing to do. Like I coach and I'm an offensive coordinator, and I usually tend to build my running game on what my offensive line is good at, not what I want them to be good at and hope that they can be good at. It's, are you guys going to be maulers, or are you more on the speed side of things? If you're on the speed side and smaller, we'll run zone. You're bigger, I'm going to let you go to work on the defensive line. But yeah, Brandon, to your point, I don't know if linebacker even fixes the defense. So we can pivot to the defensive side of this. There's problems there. Like, I don't know if it's Mike MacDonald's defense is too complicated for these guys to understand, or something's going on, because there's a lot of miscommunication across that defense. Like, we're talking about run gap fits for linebackers, or safeties coming down into fill spots, and tight ends still seem to be our kryptonite. We can't or refuse to cover them, apparently. So, yeah, I don't know how they fix the defense right away.
Well, and I think that's the issue that we get in with both these things. We're 6 weeks into a young coaching staff that's never coached together, and we're seeing communication issues on defense. We're seeing procedural issues on offense, and especially with those being over the last 3 games and 3 games within an 11-day period, like there's not a whole lot of time to make adjustments in that time frame. So I think it's still gonna, like, we have to be a little bit patient.
Oh, without question.
Yeah,
without question.
I agree. The patience thing. Okay, so let's pivot to a different question here, guys. What are your expectations for the rest of this season? Do you see this team as a fringe wild card team, or do you see this team as more of a rebuild project through the rest of this season going forward? Because our next, 3 games, we've got the Falcons, the Falcons, the Bills, and the Rams. How do you predict that those 3 games, or what are your feelings on those 3 games coming up on the schedule?
Yeah, that's going to be a big stretch there. But to Brandon's point too, they're going to have the mini bye coming into this week, and that's going to help them here a little bit. I'm not sure the Falcons are for real. I know that they've had a couple dramatic come from behind victories and all that. I don't see those 2 teams as completely on different levels. The Bills have been up and down, so we'll see how that goes. But they could come out of that with 2 wins. They could also go another 0-3. I mean, you could about sell me on anything. In terms of expectations, could they be a fringe wild card team? Maybe. I mean, I think I see 2 coming out of the South and 2 coming out of the North, so it gets a little sticky there. But at the end of the day, like, this is what we signed up for. We signed up for changeover. We signed up for, and we jettisoned an not easy, but a certain 10 wins a year to roll the dice and try something new. And here we are. And so you got to live with it. I know a lot of people in the chat last night on the post-game show, Mike's cooked. He's on his way to get fired, all that stuff. Brandon, I know you feel that it's as ridiculous as I do. Like we said at the beginning of the year, we're giving these guys 2 years just about no matter what. But I do think that the defense will get progressively better throughout the year to maybe get to about a middling defense. And offensively, I have no idea. Like Grubb always says all the right things at the podium, and I love it. I love listening to him talk. I like the guy, but the actions haven't met the words yet. So we'll see.
Yeah, expectations for me. I expect them to rattle off and go undefeated the rest of the season and take us to the Super Bowl. Like, why is that a weird expectation? That's what I want, so that's what I'm going to expect, and maybe I'll be disappointed, but that's fine. Hey, as long as we get 2 wins over the Rams, how about that? 2 wins over the Rams, and I'm happy.
That's fair. For me, I want to see kind of what we saw in 2011 from this team, how they struggled through that first half of that season, and then things started to click towards the back end, and you could start to see the change, the build, the team going in the right direction. That's kind of what my hope is for these guys now is like, hey, like, you know what, maybe fringe playoff, maybe you're, 8-9, 9-8, maybe you sneak out and get a 10-win season out of it. But I want to see it at a point where you can start to see it actually working and being a cohesive unit. Because right now it doesn't look like a cohesive unit from defense to offense. You look at the Lions game, and yes, we had injuries. The offense did quite well in that game. They, put up the points. They kept playing in the shootout. Defense was an issue. And then you look at other weeks, and our defense has been better, and our offense could barely move the ball at points. So I want to see that cohesive unit kind of come together. And I agree with you guys. I think it's minimum 2 years. I think it's even 3. I think they give this staff 3 years. I don't know if the offense or the coordinator positions get that. I could see it being a situation where if this gets worse on offense, Grubb might not be here next year potentially. I think that could happen because I think, to your point, Adam, like, I liked Grubb in college when he was at Washington, but if you can't translate to the NFL game and understand the balance that's needed more so than in the college game, it's hard to kind of keep your job going. And I found the one interesting hire outside of Leslie Frazier this offseason was, I think it's Jordan Peets. I think that's his first name is Jordan, or it's Jake. He's from the Rams. He was their pass game coordinator and McVay's like right-hand guy for years. And not because he's on McVay's staff, but because if you look at his track record of coaching, he's done a very successful job developing quarterbacks and creating successful offenses. I could see him being oh shit, our backup plan is this now because Grubb didn't work and we're going to pivot to this and move in this direction. But yeah, no, like, I kind of wish they would go to the Super Bowl this year. Like, that would be, best thing ever. But yeah, for me, if it's more like a 2011 season where we start to see some growth from this team in the right direction and to start to see those things, that will put me in a happier mood. But got to ask you guys about
some growth from Grubb. I think that, well, shoot, we saw some of that shift, I think, from the previous game to this game. Like, they actually, that first drive looked great up until the interception, right? They had a nice balance, and so they came in with a plan. They executed it apart from the turnovers. Like, I just keep going back to the turnovers from this last game. They
killed a lot of good moments for sure. The one thing I found interesting about that opening drive, though, Brandon, was it gave me because of what got said throughout the week in the press conferences with Mike MacDonald. And I don't know how you guys feel about this, but it made me really feel like Brian Schottenheimer circa 2019, where he was going to run the ball, run, pass down the field, no matter what. That's what he was doing because he was committing to what the head coach wanted at that point. And then obviously the turnovers kind of derailed everything. But that was kind of the vibe I got, was like, oh, you got told to run the damn football, so you're going to run the damn football in this opening drive, regardless of what the outcome is. So, yeah, that was
the thing is that I think that this offense probably runs a lot better with Geno Smith as the quarterback on a run pass schedule, because
probably
the thing that we saw with Russ when we were doing that type of offensive commitment was that he would drop back to pass on third down and hold the ball and then get sacked. And so, but Geno's a lot better at diagnosing the defense and making a quick decision. And I think that ultimately leads the offense to move the chains a lot better, even if you run twice and you only get 2 or 3 yards and you're facing a 3rd and 7. I think Geno, he executes on those 3rd and 7s a lot more efficiently than Russ ever did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Geno is very much Yeah, I think Geno's definitely more of a rhythm quarterback. He needs that rhythm and that consistency. He can't do the off schedule kind of stuff. And I agree with you. I think he does work better on a scheduled out kind of offense to an extent. But speaking of Geno, what are your guys' opinions? Because obviously it's being floated now on social media and everything, and Seahawks Twitter about Geno and Geno's season so far. And do we pay Geno because, Geno's contract may need to be readjusted this upcoming offseason? What are your guys' thoughts on Geno this year so far and then going forward into the future? And the reason I'm asking, Adam, I saw you drop your head, is because I know it's going to be a question that's going to kind of just be around, and I'd like to get your guys' opinion on it because I have my own, but I'd like to hear your guys' kind of opinion on Geno and the future. And that's not to say Geno's bad, like that's not at all what I'm saying here, but just what your thoughts are this team might do going forward with Geno, and how dependent is it on how this rest of the season goes?
Yeah, no, I hear you. I don't think you were trying to say that he's a bad quarterback, but that's exactly what they say on Seahawks Twitter. As I've done this now with Brandon for going on season 11 here, I've watched Seahawks Twitter have takes on all sorts of stuff. Let Russ cook, yada, yada, yada. You know what they are every time? Dead ass wrong. So I don't really give a crap what the people on Seahawks Twitter have to say. It's usually the wrong tack. In what I was seeing in the comments last night was Geno's trash. You got to get rid of him. Like, I can't believe we're paying this guy when he's been excellent all year and then has his first bad game. We'll get rid of the guy. And it was a bad game. Let's be honest about that for sure. He's great off schedule and he can do some of the off schedule stuff. Is he elite at off schedule? No, but he can get to some of that stuff. And look, I don't care if you put Tom Brady behind that offensive line, you're probably not going to a Super Bowl. Like, you're just not. It's complementary football. And the cohesion, as you mentioned earlier, Bryce, is really the bigger problem. You talk about MacDonald looking at Grubb being like, run the freaking football. Well, okay, then. And he tries to do it. And the problem is that they're figuring this out on the fly. And we heard Pete, when he was with the Patriots and the Jets and having to go to USC, say that he sat down and he had to really take a long time and think about his philosophy and how it all connected and how to make a complementary football team, and then have that set philosophy when he came into the Seahawks and then execute it. These are all young dudes. Have they really had the time to sit down and do that? Or are they figuring it out on the fly? It feels like they're figuring it out on the fly. And when that happens, you're prone to inconsistency. And inconsistency is the number one thing that's killing this team. Number two being turnovers.
And the cool thing about the Geno decision, as far as whether or not you're going to pay him, it doesn't have to be made until the offseason. So we can actually go through this whole season and see how he looks before we need to have, we can have opinions all year long about whether or not they get to that point. And I think once we get to the end of this year, we're probably going to look at Geno's stats. He's probably going to have his highest stats, at least in terms of passing yards, by the end of the season, especially if we keep up the pace offensively like we've seen so far. He's probably going to have as most number of interceptions that we've seen if we keep up this pace too, because if you ask him to throw 50 times a game, he's probably going to throw one or two picks, just because that's the nature of the position when you're throwing that many times. So it's going to, but ultimately I think you're not going to find anybody better immediately this offseason. I guess it'll depend too where we end up seeing our draft position based on wins and losses. But I don't have a whole lot of hope that this is the offseason where it's going to be a big quarterback class like we got to see this past year in 2024.
So I agree with both of you. This is my take on it, and this is kind of how I view the Geno situation, and it's kind of a little bit of both of you actually in this. I think Geno's the right quarterback right now for this Seahawks team. I don't think if you put a rookie or anyone else behind this, it's going to get any better. There's some people saying, "Oh, we need to put Sam Howell in right away." I don't agree with that, but
yeah,
I don't know if
suck even harder. Let's do that immediately. Yeah.
Hey, well, that's how Washington got the top draft pick. So if that's what we want to do, maybe.
Yeah. I don't think Jaden Daniels is walking through the doors of the draft next year, sadly. But no, the thing for me with when I look at Geno is I look at a good quarterback that can help you win games and stay in the hunt for things with the way the team currently is constructed. I don't know if he's the guy to necessarily get you to the mountaintop, but I don't know if that's what's being asked of him currently. Like some people are, viewing that as what it is. I look at Geno and I go, you don't have the pieces in place to bring in a rookie quarterback. You look at what happened to Bryce Young down in Carolina. Like he got lambasted in his first year, and now everyone's saying he's broken. And we've seen that more and more with rookie quarterbacks when they go behind a bad offensive line and not having any pieces involved. The thing for me with Geno and like you said, Brandon, with the contract, it really does, like, we can watch the season play out and make our decision. It's how are you going to allocate your cap money potentially in draft picks to fix your glaring issues on this offensive line. And if you can do that, great. But are you going to be able to do that if you're paying Geno potentially somewhere between $40 and $50 million a year? That's going to be your big question, because the other caveat to this is, where are you allocating your cap money in regards to DK potentially, because he's going to also be wanting money again, because that's where he's at in his market. So I look at it and I go, like, Geno fits what they are right now. And you need to be realistic about what they are right now, which is not a Super Bowl contending team. And kind of like we said earlier, like, they're in this kind of flux where they're a 9-8 fringe playoff team with holes. And Geno is doing what he can with the holes. And there's going to be good games and there's going to be bad games. Last night was a bad game for Geno. I just don't look at Geno and go, that's the guy I think that's going to bring us a Super Bowl trophy in the next 5 years, 6 years, if that's the goal. Mainly also because his age is a factor in this. We're not talking about 25-year-old Geno. We're talking about 34-year-old Geno. So that's kind of my take on it. He's good. I love Geno. I advocate for him. I just don't think he's going to be the guy that brings us to that next plateau, but we can't bring somebody in with the shambles that we're dealing with currently.
Yeah, I would say this. Look, if they don't take high draft capital and spend it in the trenches, specifically offensively, then if you go and you spend that draft capital on bringing in a young quarterback, you're going to lose a lot more. And Coach Mike already under fire this year, I think unnecessarily so, but under fire already. He needs to win, and he needs to win now. Bringing in a rookie next year that you're going to start over Geno if you didn't have a great year this year as a staff, I think that's a big risk that I'm not sure a guy like Mike MacDonald is going to want to take there. In terms of Geno's contract, like right now it's super team friendly. I mean, shoot at 35-40 next year. It's actually a pretty nice deal compared to the other QBs out there that are getting top dollar, like Trevor Lawrence or Tua or some of the lesser talented guys in the league. And in terms of can you win a Super Bowl in the next 4 years with Geno Smith? Absolutely. If you're spending that draft capital on fixing the big issues on your football team, so then you can just have Geno go out there and play his game instead of having to try to put on the Superman cape as he's doing now to try to, lift this team to victory each and every week. So to me personally, the idea of a 37, 38-year-old Geno is not scary, considering the amount of wear and tear that he's had on his body to this point in his career. He just hasn't had a ton because he's sat behind guys for a while. So I'm committed to Geno for 4 years. That's the way I look at it, because you're still going to get another team-friendly deal, Brandon.
I'm trying to think of other quarterbacks in the league who you can consistently ask to go out and score 30 points a game and get you victories when your defense can't stop the run. And I feel like the list is about Mahomes, Josh Allen, and then I start to struggle with who those quarterbacks are after those couple guys. And Jaden Daniels might work his way into that conversation too, just with the way, like, he's been accurate and incredible, but he's not to that point yet because he's still a rookie. There's just not a lot of quarterbacks that are at that level. So I like where you're at, Bryce, because I like telling Geno that he can't do things, because when we do that as fans, he usually goes out and proves us wrong. So yeah, Geno Smith can't win us the big game. I agree with you.
So pivoting off of Geno, what are your guys' thoughts on DK? and DK going forward, because obviously he is going to be up for a contract, and given how the receiver market turned out this offseason with the guys that did get paid, and then kind of what these first 6 games have shown, are you in favor of paying DK, or are you in favor of potentially moving on from DK?
The thing about DK, I don't know why I end up defending him so often, but I do. People get real mad at him because he finds himself in moments where maybe he isn't always as consistent as we might hope for as much as he's paid. But I also think, like, okay, a lot of people want Tyler Lockett to retire because he's getting up there in age and he's getting to that retirement point. And if we allow DK to walk, and then what are we going to be down to? JSN and Jake Bobo? Like that's going to look a whole lot different offensively than I as much as the people who love Jake Bobo want to see him out there and catching more passes. Like I don't think it's going to result in a dynamic offense when those are your top 2 pass catchers. So yeah, I want to keep around DK. I think they have the ability to build on the offensive line, also pay DK among the better receivers. The only question that I am getting to is, especially in a game like last night, where it's like they gave everybody an opportunity to be like, okay, which one of these guys is going to be our featured number 1? Like sometimes we'll see Tyler get a majority of the catches. Sometimes we'll see JSN, like in the Patriots game. And then sometimes we'll see DK get fed a little bit more. And I don't know. I know going into the season, we wanted to see DK be like that guy. But I also wonder, too, if he's going to be getting 9, 10, 11 targets a game, if that's going to help us ultimately, too. So where I'm having a little bit of trouble is where this team's going to find the balance as to who can be that go-to guy in key situations. And unfortunately, DK has not been as consistent as I think we would all like him to be in those situations, which is why we're having this conversation.
Yeah, I'd say DK is at 85 to 90% a number 1 receiver, and he is going to seek top of the market, like the tippy top of the market type money. And so really, this isn't much about how I feel about DK, the player, all that much, but more just the way that the salaries for wide receivers have gone off the rails the last couple of years. It kind of started with Christian Kirk, and then it went bananas from there over the last couple of years. And I'm sorry, man, they're not as valuable as a top 10 quarterback. They're just not. I mean, you can go out and find receivers in any round. They're the easiest to find in later rounds. I'm still not saying it's easy overall, but of all the position groups, there's more of them coming out of college each and every year than ever before. And you can hit on those guys. I'm just not a huge fan of dumping a crap ton of money into the perimeter when you haven't shored up the interior, because it's really where football games are won and lost. So it has a lot less to do with DK, or if I'm worried about whether he's pouty or not, or the lack of ball security or anything like that. More just about the market. I think it's gone bananas.
Yeah, no, I agree. The market has, and Christian Kirk was the start of that. When he had his ridiculous contract down there in Jacksonville, I was kind of like, did they just really pay that guy that amount of money? And it just kind of threw the market out of whack. For me with DK, like I look at, if you were to say hypothetically, Tyler was to retire, which is a potential, and DK were to be traded, you're left with JSN and Jake Bobo. Like your receiver room got massively depleted. And so I agree to a point that you could move on. I would rather keep DK personally. I think you also don't have to give DK as long of a term deal as some people think you do to keep him around. I think you could give him something where he could still get back to the market before he's 30 and get potentially another payday in there. The thing for me, though, and I really agree with Brandon on this, they are trying to feed too many guys and make somebody the number 1 instead of committing to it. Like you said, JSN had his game, DK's had a game, Tyler had his game. Like, I would rather see them focus maybe more on getting DK involved in ways that DK is good at getting involved, because it feels sometimes with this offense with Grubb, he's trying to make DK into a complete receiver. rather than getting DK involved or getting him the ball in ways DK gets the ball best. Like DK is not a end zone fade route runner. That's not his thing. But we keep seeing him to try it, and it's driving me nuts. Like DK is better at running a hard slant and you throwing it in there and letting guys bounce off of DK. Like that's how you get DK the ball within the 10-yard line and the end zone. Don't throw him a fade. He's never shown the ability really to do it well. Jake Bobo does it better. And that's Jake Bobo's asset, is he's actually good at running the fade route. The one position
might
group
be the only guy.
I know that's true. He might be the only guy. But the one thing I was going to say about, and moving off DK a little bit with this offense and just one position group that drives me absolutely bonkers. And I think we don't know, we get burned by it constantly. We talked about earlier. We don't know how to use tight ends in Seattle. We have no flipping clue.
Use what?
Exactly. Tight ends.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like this
That's
random position.
Is it
Yeah.
new?
It must be, because we don't know how to use it here in Seattle. We constantly pay guys money to come here and because they're going to be effective in our offense, and nothing seems to work out. The last two effective tight ends that were ever in Seattle, in my opinion, were Zach Miller and John Carlson. Really, like Luke Wilson was decent, but Luke Wilson wasn't a right home tight end at any point.
No love for Atula Mealy? What's
yeah, Tulamili was okay. He wasn't, but what I'm saying is and you get where I'm going with this. Like we pay, again, we talk about where we allocated cap money. We brought Noah Fant back. Noah Fant has not been an impact on this offense at all anymore. To be honest, I would say AJ Barner has been more effective as a rookie coming in. And I really liked AJ Barner coming out of the draft. Why did we go and pay Noah Fant? You could have let him go and you could have, brought in a better guard for Lincoln Tomlinson potentially, because you would have freed up some cap money in that respect. We need to stop trying to do things that we're not good at, and we're not good at not drafting, but paying tight ends and using tight ends. Use them for what they're worth. AJ Barner, you're great on your little outlet plays. Get him the ball, let him go do things. He's a cheap 4-year player that you can have. I just don't understand this affiliation or asphyxiation, I should say, with tight ends and always paying them money and never, ever, ever using them correctly.
Yeah, Brandon, how do you feel about that Noah Fant money? Was there another place maybe you wanted to see that? Yeah.
I mean, I think I covered the Damian Lewis thing well enough, but that's fine. I agree with you. I mean, Colby Parkinson probably would have been an even better guy to keep if you wanted to keep a tight end. Maybe not he's probably better at blocking than Fant is. So you have that. Yeah, I don't know what that's a John Schneider issue that he apparently has this fixation on, and let's not pay those guys. That's fine.
So speaking of John Schneider, how much of a hot seat do you think John Schneider is currently sitting on with the fact of how this team is going to perform potentially going forward, and with the going forward roster construction? Because I'm not sure when his contract actually expires. I don't know if it's this year or next year that his contract's up for renewal. But what do you guys what are your opinions on John Schneider now that you've kind of seen the 6 games so far? And I know it's early still, but with how this roster's been constructed over the last, say, 6 years for Seattle.
Yeah, John Schneider isn't going anywhere anytime soon. He'll get extended, and he's one of the top 10 GMs in the league. Does he have glaring weaknesses? You bet. Do I want to roll the dice and bring in some new fresh GM to go with this new fresh coaching staff that John went out and hand plucked himself? No, definitely not. John Schneider won the coup with Pete Carroll, the power struggle. One bad year as they're moving on from Pete, and his hot 2%. He's going nowhere.
Yeah, and he is under contract through the 2027 draft at least. So he's got a little bit of time. I think where his seat maybe ends up getting hot is if there's an ownership change. And that would be the one question that a new owner wants to bring in their own guy. And I have no idea when that has to happen or could happen, but the potential is there at some point.
Yeah, the owner change thing. I think the biggest hiccup with before at least was there was a contract in place with the city of Seattle that if somehow there was an ownership change, something was allocated in payment. Now that's out the window. I don't think there's going to be an ownership change anytime soon. I don't think Jody Allen would have switched coaches if that was going to happen. I think she would have left things status quo and kind of set it off for the new person to come in and make their changes. No, and I agree with you. I don't think John Schneider's in the hot seat. I wanted to pose that question again because I think it was, kind of an interesting topic considering we've got the fact of
considering he can't decide on guards, he can't figure out linebackers, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing is like Adam said, he's got his glaring weaknesses. The one thing I think will be interesting next offseason, though, for this team is the fact that I feel like the coaching staff will be more involved than they were this year because they were still building this coaching staff during the draft process, during the free agent process. And that was one thing that was alluded to a lot in that was like, hey, Mike MacDonald's worried with the coaches and getting everything set up there. We're doing our thing with the players. And I think that maybe is where you might have, especially with maybe the free agent side, missed on some things that maybe Mike might have wanted that didn't get necessarily conveyed correctly. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes in the next offseason. But with that being said, we've had a whole boatload of questions come in here and comments. So I'm going to pick a couple out of here and we'll answer them as we go. Let's see here. Let me go back up to the top. Oh, man, we've had a whole bunch come in here. Okay, so here's a good one here. Jeff, in your opinions, what causes our terrible first half? It's been killing us since Detroit. Adam, you go first with this one.
Oh, goody. Yeah. I have no idea. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you like I have an answer to why this team starts out slow. It's the same thing we saw under Pete for years and years, and we were all frustrated. We all thought it was just his, can you win it in the fourth quarter, little ditty that he'd always go to. But for whatever reason, it does seem like that they are just still in that mindset. I don't understand it. It almost feels like a stupid vibe thing. I don't know about you, Brandon. Maybe like it's more obvious to you, but it just kind of head scratching.
Well, it is head scratching in the sense that we've now heard from Coach Mike that he wants to emphasize starting fast. And so with that emphasis, it leads you to think like, oh, well, they did that in the first couple games. That makes a lot of sense. And maybe there is that added bit of pressure then that might be leading to some of those turnovers, because I feel like turnovers have been a big part of the issue, whether it's, DK fumbling it after catching, whether it's Geno throwing into coverage and having it picked off. So there might just be, whether it's that added pressure to start fast that the coach is putting on the team, or that there's just that little bit of lack of execution that we've seen just over a short time span of 3 games, that it hasn't been great.
I came up with the theory while you were saying that, Brandon. Okay. Yeah.
Perfect.
Maybe it's just a function of the defense giving up points so fast and so early that the offense is really pressing and feeling like they're behind and having to throw the ball a lot. Like maybe that's where it's coming from, because if you don't really have the personnel to stop the run, and they clearly don't at linebacker, then it doesn't matter how much you're going to come out and say you're going to start fast on defense. You're just going to get it crammed down your throat.
Yeah, no, I wish I had an answer. I think part of this is just, again, you got an OC that's new to the NFL in a whole. And I think you've got a team that's still trying to figure out their identity. What are we good at? And they don't know offensively what they're good at. And defensively, I still think, like, yes, they pressure the quarterback well, but there's other parts of this defense where I'm kind of going, like, you guys are not up to par where you should be or need to be, even given the talent that we do have. So, yeah, I'm kind of lost. I don't know what the answer is to that. I hope they figure it out, but it's an interesting one. So I've got
Mike
another.
MacDonald doesn't have the answer either.
No, he doesn't. I wish he did too.
He also doesn't know.
So here's another one from the Snail. I like the username. We need a punt returner. I am in
What, D. Williams?
advocation.
Wait, you're not a D. Williams fan, Snail?
Oh man, D. Williams, he is advocate or putting a roster spot, I should say, for a guy that is solely going to be your returner, basically, and he can't seem to hang on to the ball is a massive, massive issue. And it's not the first game that we've seen D. Williams struggle returning a punt, returning a kickoff. It's like he has to fumble the ball before he can catch it, it seems like, almost.
Well, let's give him a little bit of credit. Like Devin Witherspoon did block a dude into him.
That's true. That's true. I'll give him that. But like, I don't know outside of that what his value is if he's not great at it. Like if you're going to add, like put a roster spot in place just for that. I don't know if that's a misstep on them by what they thought the kickoff and new NFL special teams were going to be like, but I wonder if that gets changed coming up here. Like I would rather see potentially someone else back there with Chenault, even though Chenault did fumble in the game, like a Derek Young, maybe even like give someone else a crack back there that may be able to be better at it. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? Do we need a new punt returner?
Why can't Laviska catch punts since he also catches kicks?
That's fair. I'd be good with that too.
Yeah, it's a lot like kickers and punters. They can't do each other's jobs. It's just impossible, Brandon. Why even ask?
It's totally different rotation of the football.
Yeah,
but yeah, we can put them both back on kickoffs.
Yeah. I never thought I'd say this in my lifetime, but I kind of miss DJ Dallas. I look, the number one thing that you need out of your returner is to be able to catch the freaking ball, and he's been putting it in jeopardy here in the last couple of games, and it makes me nervous. Like, at least give me that. At least have somebody who's a reliable catcher, and then we can talk about, you know, if you need some, dynamic playmaking from that guy. But it would be great. I've been, you know, sad to watch our special teams, specifically on punt return, be a non-factor for years and years now.
I miss Brian Walters.
That's who I was going to say. Thank you, Brandon. That is literally who's on the tip of my tongue. I was going to say, I miss Brian Walters right now because he never dropped the punt. Okay, so here's another one. Yeah, that's true. He was the fair catch specialist at that point. Michael Fawcett, at the start of the season, I would have assumed our secondary is our best unit on D. After week 6, what is our best unit?
Yeah, it probably is the defensive line. Just and unfortunately, injuries have hammered us there. But they haven't been able to stop the run either. But I think that I look more at the linebackers as to taking on a little bit more of that responsibility of in terms of where more of the failure goes. So yeah, defensive line probably the best, and that has to be it because you can only choose among 3.
Yep, Adam.
Yeah, no, Brandon hit it on the head. It has been the D line, especially when Murphy's been in there, and I think it's going to improve again when he comes back and be even better. But, you know, the secondary, yeah, we all had high hopes for that. But Trey Brown's taken a step back. He's looked pretty bad in a couple games now. And Spoon, maybe it's just an underutilization in some regard, but we haven't seen that big, you know, a bunch of big plays out of Spoon so far this year. Not that he's been playing poorly, but just, yeah, the wow hasn't been there. And, you know, Reek obviously injured a little bit. So, been a disappointment in the secondary overall, and not to mention anybody not named Julian Love in the safety position. So, defensive line for sure.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you guys. I think it's a defensive line. I think our secondary's got its issues, and like Adam alluded to, Brown's had some struggles down the stretch here. But yeah, the one thing I was gonna say too is Witherspoon's kind of been non-factor, it seems like, in a lot of ways. He's not at all as loud or whatever as he was last year. Like, he just seemed to have kind of fallen off a little bit in that regard. Like, even there was a point in the game where he usually last year, like I remember the Pittsburgh game vividly, where he chucked, I think it was Warner, out of bounds, and he just had this kind of fire and attitude about him. And I just haven't seen that really as much this year as I thought I would have, considering, you know, the fact I figured he was going to be more of a presence on the defense. But here's another one coming in here. This is from Motive. I think we need to run a complete no-huddle offense like the Bills did in the 90s. It was fun to watch and got them to 4 straight Super Bowls.
Well,
Look, I'm for
Thurman
having
Thomas
fun.
just called and yeah. Well, Thurman Thomas just calls and he disagrees about the no running there. But look, at the end of the day, I guess no huddle. I read that wrong. But yeah, the K-gun offense, I mean, are we really that far away from it right now? Like
No.
that's kind of how it feels at this point, is just all gun and soft football.
And that it did work out to get them to those 4 straight Super Bowls, but yeah, soft football ends up hurting you in the playoffs ultimately. I think it would be fun. This offense, I think, has the ability to be really fun, even based on what we've seen through the first 6 weeks. Like I like scoring points. If we can have fun watching our team play offense this year, and it might not be so fun on the defensive side, but hey, this is a growing year anyway.
Yeah,
have some fun.
Yep, no, agreed. All right, and then we've got this one from Ryan Eady. I miss Izzo.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Izzo was a good special teams coach. I was kind of surprised he actually wasn't retained on the staff, but where is he right now? Where did he go? Because they have a good special teams unit where he
Did
went.
he go to the Commanders?
I think he might have. I think you're right. I think he did go to the Commanders.
Yeah. I mean, MacDonald had to have one of his buddies from Michigan on the team, right? So why not bring a Harbaugh?
That's fair. That is fair. Like that was the other thing that was very surprising when Mike MacDonald did put this staff together, how few connections he really kind of had on this staff compared to most guys when they take over. They have a fair amount of guys that they know or whatnot that they've kind of built relationships with. It was a very interesting staff construction, I would say. And I wonder if the defense doesn't really put it together this year, I wonder if there will be maybe some guys brought in that have more of a connection to Mike MacDonald's defensive side of things for next year, potentially, if things don't go well that way.
Yeah, I think that's possible.
You kind of forget as a fan that MacDonald brought in like this kind of hodgepodge of guys from all over the place, and a lot different than the way that a lot of coaches construct staff. And I do think that points to another data point of why this is taking a while for it to come together. I mean, so many different dudes from so many different philosophies, all young, all trying to make their mark. And I do think it leads to some confusion. So that's one of the things that does give me hope going forward, because I do think MacDonald's a good communicator, and it just takes time for that to gel. There's just no other solution.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. Here's another one from Ryan. Can we get Clowney? He's a hot name right now for Seattle with the Chenna injury.
Yeah. Well, he does have that connection to Mike MacDonald. I just don't know if the John Schneider connection, if there was any kind of bridge burn there. But
oh, jeez.
Right.
So yeah, no, I think to wrap up what we've got kind of going on with the Seahawks and everything, and I'll give you guys a chance here to kind of plug your guys' stuff for your show. But I would say I just want to see this team start growing and becoming more cohesive as a group going forward. And hopefully that starts in Atlanta in however many days that comes up here in 10 days or so. I just don't want to see it get worse than what it currently is. I think hopefully this is bottom for this season and this regime, and they can start to kind of climb back out. And if that means going back to more basics and more stuff like that, like the thing for me that's been driving me a bit nuts lately is the tackling has gotten so bad. Again, it's like we kind of made this claim that they hit more and they tackled a bit more in training camp and stuff. Like you need to go back and work on the fundamentals of that. Maybe you need to just kind of get this thing steered back in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that after they have a little bit that extra long week after Thursday night football, I'm willing to be patient this season and see where it goes. Yeah, you want to see that growth. it's just, yeah, I think we need to realize it's going to take a little bit of time with these guys, but also I'm optimistic. Like, this is not a Jim Mora situation. Like, there's no way that there's something that happens during the season that that Coach Mike ends up going off the deep end in front of the media and showing that he's ready to throw the entire team under the bus. Like, we've seen that he's going to be an accountable leader. And so I'm optimistic with him. I'm even optimistic in Ryan Grubb that he has that ability to grow too. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes over these next few weeks.
Yeah, man. Progression rather than regression. I'm with you, Bryce. Like, that'd be nice to see, no doubt about it. We might see some progress over the next, few games here, but I don't think this is the first rock bottom or the only rock bottom this year. I only think it's the first. I mean, I think there's going to be another stretch that gets rough, and it's going to just be uneven and inconsistent for a lot of the year as they try to remold this team into their image. And you know what? If we're not doing Pete this year, and we're going to start over with the new coach, I do trust Mike, and I'm going to give him a lot of grace. Like, let's just see him try to do his thing this first year. I guarantee you he's going to be better his second year, no matter what, just because of all the experience he's going to gain.
No, I agree with both of you guys. So before we get out of here tonight, Brandon, Adam, tell the listeners, on my show at least, where they can find you guys and what you guys got coming up.
Yep. You can check us out. Seahawkerspodcast.com is our website and all of our shows up there. So if you want to subscribe, you can go there, find our recent episodes. You can also find, we do some other shows on the Believe Podcast Network with some of our buddies that we've built through the years. We've got Clinton Barr, we've got Phil Leidick, Wilson Kahn that join us on different shows, and you can find those at For the Hawkra under that podcast feed. And we have, just a variety of shows where we do a post-game recap with Clinton that's called 3 In, 3 Out. Adam does a gambling show with Clinton and Wilson called PNW Prop Stars. And then we have our Seahawkers What If show where we preview the matchup of the upcoming team. And Phil Leidick does a great job with that, coming up with questions and talking about, what things we might see and how our team might respond. So, and then of course we have our Seahawkers podcast, which is out on YouTube. You can find it anywhere too with podcasts. Adam and I have been doing it since 2013. And we just have a blast talking Seahawks. Just a couple of buddies from kindergarten still hanging out and talking football.
Yeah. Yep. He hasn't gotten sick of me yet. I don't know how that's the case, but yeah, man, check it all out. I truly believe that the full smattering of shows that we put out is some of the most unique Seahawks content you're going to find out there. No doubt about it. And Bryce, like, your channel here, HawksZone Rundown, what you guys are doing, you and Ryan, like, you guys are getting after it, man. And I'm impressed. Really enjoy being able to chat with you today, man. This is cool. Everybody, if you've been listening to our show, go check out HawksZone Rundown and make sure you hit that sub button.
Really appreciate that, guys. It was a lot of fun. We definitely want to have you guys back on the show at some point further down the season so we can kind of hash out where this team's gone. So yeah, for anyone from the HawksZone Rundown, please go sub to these guys. Check out their stuff that they've got going on. I've listened to them since 2013 and are a big reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now with the HawksZone Rundown. So really great to have you guys on. Everyone else, subscribe, hit that notification button. But for tonight, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game.
What a run! Marshawn Lynch, get off me!
DK. Hey, it's John Schneider with Seattle Seahawks.
That's the